Today, I'm delighted to introduce my special guest, Alan Stein. After 25 years in the corporate world, including leading global teams at Google, Meta, Salesforce, and Tableau, Alan Stein launched his startup, Kadima Careers, with a mission of accelerating 1 million careers by 2040. Alan has interviewed thousands of candidates as a hiring manager and also interviewed for thousands of times throughout his career. So he has unique insights that inform Kadima's proprietary job acquisition method. When Alan isn't accelerating careers, he enjoys spending time with his 3 teenagers, 2 dogs, and one incredibly supportive wife. Alan is a lifetime New Yorker and has lived in Brooklyn for the last 19 years. It's a pleasure to have you on my show today, Alan.
Thanks, Liz. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you have extensive career experience in corporate and tech and bring a wealth of knowledge. I am inspired by the work that you do at Kadima with a mission to level the playing field between the interviewer and the candidate and to reduce systemic wage gaps. What fueled that purpose?
Yeah, great question. So there's this great term, Japanese term called ikigai, which is like translates loosely into like the reason for being or raison d'etre. And it is, imagine a Venn diagram with 4 different circles. One of them is finding something that you're good at. Secondly, something that you enjoy doing. Third, that you can get paid for doing. Fourth, what the world needs. And what happens to be at that intersection for me is career acceleration, helping people get jobs. I've been good at doing it myself. I've been good at helping other people do that as well. And that, like, when I realized that I was no longer well suited for the corporate world because I kept getting fired, that it was time for me to do something on my own. I thought about what I was best at doing and where I can make a living, and started Kadima Careers with the mission to accelerate 1 million careers.
In thinking about these gender pay gaps, I kind of want to jump into the topic of salary negotiation.
Yeah.
In your experience, in my experience, a lot of job seekers do not negotiate their salary for various reasons, including the fear of maybe losing the job offer. Maybe there's a
Mhm.
lack of confidence, or they don't have experience with negotiation. From your expertise, can you share some effective strategies or approaches that individuals can use to overcome some of these fears and barriers?
Yeah. So first off, very few people, well, I don't know what the numbers are, but based on my experience myself and based on making offers to lots of candidates, very few candidates ask to negotiate. There is no harm in asking for more. If you do it in a respectfully and humble and appreciative way, the worst that will come back to you is no, we can't go any higher on this offer. The best that can come from it is maybe $143,000 more. That's a record that we've been able to get for one of our clients in a single year alone. So first off, a key element is to ask. And the second element is not to negotiate over text, not to negotiate over email. Have a conversation. Ideally, over video is better than phone because you are building rapport with that individual. And ultimately, negotiation is a conversation of influence. You're trying to influence the other party to come closer to what you want than where they're originally at. So you need to use lots of different influence tactics, which I've read a lot about and I've practiced a bunch on as well. And we can go deeper into some of those tactics.
Yeah, and I'm curious because I feel like I have negotiated like via email, and I think it depends too, like how the employer reaches out. Sometimes they'll call you, or sometimes they'll put it in email. I'm just curious to know why would you discourage, going back and forth through email?
Email can be misconstrued lots of times. I'm sure you have seen emails that you thought someone was mad at you about, and then you talk to them and they weren't really mad at you, or someone might have put a punctuation somewhere and you're like, oh, why are they so angry at me, or something like that. Things can be misconstrued in email. Secondly, ultimately, the negotiation is working with a constraint that the recruiter or the hiring manager has to work with, and there's a range there. And you want to go towards the high end of the range that they're able to work with. And the stronger of a relationship that you can build with that individual, the more likely that individual is going to advocate for you, be supportive of you, and come to some sort of agreement. Additionally, by having that conversation, you may suss out a lot of insights and information that you may not be aware of if you're just having a transactional conversation back and forth via email or text. So, for something that is as important and as valuable during a salary negotiation stage, and we call that like a high impact negotiation, because when you get that offer, that is the best time in your career where you have a leverage to actually make more money. The more you can influence that through personal interaction, through building affinity and like having people like you, the more likely that person will advocate for you, support you, and come more towards what you're trying to achieve.
Okay. So it's good to have the conversation as you're going through the process of negotiation, but ultimately you want that offer to be in writing.
Yes, yes.
Just to make that
Once
clear.
you 100% agree. So once you communicate, once you and I are aligned with what we have agreed to, then yes, it should be in writing. And most offer letters are in writing, either a PDF or DocuSign or something like that, or in some smaller organizations, just laid out in an email.
Okay, great. And I know we're going to talk about the process and what all of that looks like when we get to that point of the job offer and negotiation. So let's rewind a little bit. Why is it crucial that job seekers negotiate their salary?
It's not crucial, it's just advantageous.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got my job at Google, I left American Express. I was at American Express. I got the offer at Google after 11 rounds of interviews, after studying my ass off to get the job. I finally was made the offer, and it was for 37% more than I was making at American Express. And I heard that offer was at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night because I don't know that Google works late. It was 7 o'clock on the West Coast, 10 o'clock on the East Coast when I got that call and they made that offer. And I was like, where do I sign when they told me that? And I later found out that people on my team that were reporting into me that were lower level, I came in as a level 6, but I had people on my team that were level 5s that were making more money than me. And
Mm.
I found out also later on that people that came into Google at the same level as me were making more money and doing the same sort of job, were making more money than me. I quickly learned to realize that there's a range of compensation bands. And if I had just, instead of telling Puneet, that was a recruiter who made me the offer back on this Wednesday night, instead of saying, hey, where do I sign? I can't wait to start. If I had said instead, thank you for the offer. I'm really excited about this. I want to take some time to digest and talk it over with my wife. When can I get back to you by? And then to give it some time for me to digest it, come up with a strategy, get on a call with Puneet, probably like 2 days later, maybe a day or two later, to give me some time to do some research and analysis. I know for a fact that I would have gotten 20 to $100,000 more in that offer. So it's not required that you negotiate, but that 20 to $100,000 would have been a hell of a lot more valuable for me and my family than it would have been valuable for Larry and Sergey, who were leading Google at the time.
No, you bring up some very important points. I think kind of going back to the fear of losing that offer, when candidates get that offer, they get so excited and they're like, oh, or, this is amazing. Or some individuals that maybe get that offer that is way more than they were probably expecting.
Yeah. And it
And
was like it was way more than I was expecting.
and you're like, this is great. I made it. But I think I think what you just mentioned is so key where you don't want to accept an offer right away. And it's okay that that's a common practice, right? Like employers are expecting for you to say, okay, how much time can I have to think it through? Like you said, talk to my wife, talk to my family. And then that the opportunity to also do some research and be informed of what are some of the industry trends or what is the salary expectation for that particular type of organization. So can we talk a little bit about what is the role of research in salary negotiation and how they can gather and use market data to support that desired salary?
Yeah. So there is a lot of data out there, but the data is imperfect
Mm.
and subjective to selection bias. So you can look on sites like levels.fyi, on apps like Blind, on Fishbowl, on Glassdoor, on salary.com, on Comparably. There are all these sites that aggregate compensation data. Some of them are better than others, but none of them are perfect. So when I was last at Salesforce, I was a level 9 in New York director. I looked on levels.fyi to see what level 9 directors in customer success make at Salesforce, and it showed ranges between $90,000 and $428,000. First
Mm.
off, it's a ridiculous range. So I don't even know how helpful that is. Secondly, if you looked at the compensation that I left Salesforce with, and I've put my W-2 on LinkedIn, so I'm very public about this, not to brag, but really just to share with people about how much money you can make from some of these top tech companies. I was earning $515,000. So if I looked at levels.fyi and thought that I should earn between 90 and 428,000, I would have been selling myself short. So you use that data in the negotiation when it benefits you. If you don't use that data if it doesn't benefit you, and you find the data points that benefit you and you bring that to the table, but only after you receive the offer. And like one of my key tips is do not negotiate, do not even focus on the money until after you get the offer. Because any time before you get the offer, the company has an asymmetry of information, an asymmetry of power. And if they see you hemming and hawing or potentially being a difficult person to negotiate with, they're going to pass on you and go with someone who looks like an easier person to land the role. Once they offer you that role, once they make that job offer to you, they've already invested a lot of time and resources and have committed to you. So they actually want to hire you at that point, and you are their top choice at that point. So there, finally, you have some leverage in the conversation.
That's a great strategy. I think, really you're selling yourself, you want to, be the best candidate. And then that's when you kind of have more of that leveraging power. Like now we're in those conversations. Now, I guess I would love to address that because there are employers during the interview that they will ask, what are your salary expectations? And they'll ask early on,
Yeah.
how can a candidate comfortably approach that situation? Like, hey, Liz, so what are your salary expectations? Like, what should I say?
Yeah. So the recruiter's asking that information, they're trying to make their job easier. Because if you say a number that's too high, they'll be like, okay, adios, Liz. We're going to look for somebody else. If you say a number that's too low, they're like, well, we can get this woman really cheap. Awesome. Uh, if you say something in the middle, great. Then you're still in consideration, but you don't know what that range is. So you're taking a lucky guess to see if you can match their number. So that's why you don't share that number. And the way that you deflect, defer, and decline to talk about that compensation is very simple. There's three ways to head this off. If a recruiter says, hey, Liz, excited to have you for this role. What sort of compensation are you seeking? You know what? I want to get paid fairly and in line with the scope and impact of the role. That will shut up about 80 to 90% of people. If the recruiter digs deeper, says, well, Liz, we really need a number here. Please share us the number. I'm really excited to work at Spotify. Compensation's not going to get in the way. That will head off another 10 or 15%. If for some reason they ask a third time, which is very rare,
Mm.
you can ask them, I'm not really familiar with how Amazon compensation philosophy is. Do you mind sharing that with me? Then you jot it down. And in the case of Amazon, Amazon's is really kooky, actually very complicated, but every company is slightly different with their compensation philosophy. You jot that down, you double check just so that you can get some insight and say, oh, that's different than how I'm currently being compensated at JP Morgan. can I think about this and get back to you? And they'll be like, sure. And you will never need to get back to them because you will have passed the recruiter screen at that point or not and got onto the hiring manager. So that's how you do it. It works in almost every case. If that does not work, another thing to do is in the case of salary transparency, which is a topic we can talk about, the numbers are very inconsistent. They're not comparing apples to apples. But if they do have salary transparency and they do list the salary compensation on the job description, then you can say, you know what, the salary that you guys this is as a fourth option, by the way, after you go through the other three. The salary that you list on the job description is within the right ballpark and leave it at that. You want to stay in the game until you get the offer.
Yeah, I've used that strategy where it's, I always tell my clients never throw out a number.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, even when I've been when I've interviewed, it's like we already have a budget in mind. And
Yeah.
so even asking, well, what have you budgeted for this position? I mean, I come from the nonprofit industry, so that I feel like that has always been a fair question to ask.
But every company has a budget for a role, and every company has an escalation path. So the recruiter can work within a certain level. Then sometimes they can go up to the hiring manager of saying, hey, can we make an exception? Then they can bounce it up to higher levels to get exceptions. Exceptions can be made, they're not always made. So you got to be careful of like how important of a hire you are. And there's ways to assess that based on lots of different factors. But there's always a range that the recruiter is working with, and the higher that you kick it up and the higher level that you are, the wider that range usually is.
No, absolutely. That's definitely right. Okay, so I am your client, okay? And I'm excited. Alan, I just got a job offer that pays $120,000 a year. I'm excited. I'm really eager and I think I'm going to take it. But I know that I need to negotiate my salary. Can you walk us through how would you walk me through an effective salary negotiation?
Yeah. So my first question would be, what's your BATNA? And this is a negotiation term that people can learn about in what's it called? Getting to yes. I didn't come up with this term. I learned it in business school. It's called best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So what's your plan B? So if you came to me with a $120,000 offer, I would say, okay, Liz, what happens if you don't take this offer? What's your plan B? So tell me, actually, in this hypothetical scenario, what would your plan B be if you don't take this $120,000 offer, Liz?
If I don't take it, maybe just continue on my job search. I
So
can set,
are you currently unemployed
let's say,
in this hypothetical scenario?
okay, I'm ready to make a career pivot.
So you're currently working or are you
I,
unemployed?
I'm currently working, but I'm in a job that I'm not enjoying. Like I'm
Okay.
ready to change my purpose.
And how much are you making in your current job?
Let's say I'm making 90.
Okay. So this job's going to give you $30,000 more. You're not happy in your job. I say
Mhm.
you take this job. So if you know you're going to take the job, now let's try to get you as much as possible in this job. So whether you get 120 or 150 or 180,000, whatever the number is, you know you want to take this job. So that is telling me that you don't want to negotiate with an ultimatum. If you negotiate with an ultimatum, you're like, hey, unless you pay me $180,000, I'm not taking this job. Sometimes you can use that strategy. But if I know that you want to take this job, you don't want to play hardball here. So you have some conversations with them. You will next set up a call with the recruiter. You'll tell the recruiter, thank you for the offer. I'm really excited about it. I have a few questions that I'd like to go over. What is your availability like 24 hours from now, 48 hours, like at the end of the week here? Get some time on the recruiter's calendar. Then prepare a list of questions that you have. Some questions about the job, about like what's the start date, what the title is, like ask any like logistical questions. And then at the end, say, and you know what, like I appreciate the offer. It was lower than I was anticipating. Ideally, you come with some data points that I see that other program managers at my level here at similar sort of companies are making 140 to 180. I'd like to get somewhere in that range. What can actually, I wouldn't even give those numbers first. I would have the numbers in your back pocket, but you tell them that you're excited about the opportunity, but the compensation is lower than anticipated. What can you do on the compensation side? And to the extent that you can be flexible in terms of what compensation levers they use, because the 120,000, we didn't dig deep into this offer, but there's different things in the compensation. It could be salary, could be bonus, could be sign-on bonus, could be relocation bonus, could be equity, could be options, could be a few other things. Um, it doesn't really matter. Like ideally in your case, it's better to get the salary boosted because salary will lift all other things. But salary is often the hardest thing for the company to boost. Actually, before salary, the best thing to boost is level. So if they're bringing you in as a level 4 at 120,000, if you can somehow get them to boost it to level 5 and don't even talk about the compensation, by going to level 5, it's going to put you in a different band, especially at larger organizations like companies that have over 1,000 people are likely going to have different levels and titles. And if you go from a level 4 to a level 5, everything is going to reset your salary, your bonus rate, your equity, everything else. So the level is one of the first things that you aim for moving, but it's also usually one of the hardest things to move. And the more flexible that you are in terms of what levers they use, because you don't know what levers a company can best use.
Hmm.
Some companies can throw away, like give away RSUs, restricted stock units, like water. Some can give sign-on bonuses pretty liberally. Um, Startups are very good at just changing your title to something more inflated, not giving any more money, but you can get a bigger title at a startup because it's not costs them nothing. So it really depends on the situation. But those are some things that I would dig into.
And this just kind of shows the importance of doing your research and really understanding the type of organization that you are exploring.
Yeah.
And I love that idea of like the levels that levelers. What did you got? Levelers?
Well, there's a site called levels.fyi.
Okay.
And a lot of organizations, when I was at American Express, we had levels. When I was at Google, we had levels. When I was at Facebook, we had levels. When I was at Tableau, we had, well, actually, Tableau did not have levels. They were going through the leveling process, and then we got acquired by Salesforce. So then we paused figuring out how to level everybody. But almost every organization has levels of people and different salary bands. And a lot of these companies, especially larger companies, will pay a lot of money to Watson Wyatt, or there's a few other like salary compensation consulting companies that give them a lot more data than any of us are privy to. So the companies are trying to set up a compensation philosophy that's fair and equitable, but they do not share that. And
Mm-hmm.
because they do not share that, it's hard for you as a candidate to understand what their compensation philosophy is.
How does someone get that information?
Uh, well, you can get it from insiders. So, yeah, something that I highly recommend that people do is not only build relationships before they get a job to get their referrals into there, but as you're actively interviewing, continue to build relationships within the organization, continue to get that surround sound support of people saying positive things on your behalf while you're interviewing. And you might build some big advocacy there where you can speak to someone that you built advocacy and support with at that company and ask them what the comp philosophy is and how they compensate people. And they might have some information. They will not have as much information as HR and the payroll team. But if you talk to an employee that's been at Spotify for 4 years, they're going to have a pretty good sense of how the compensation process works and how the levels work.
Agreed. I think that's so important when you have a plan of the type of companies you want to go into. I know that's something that when I coach individuals, like, okay, let's focus not so much on the job titles, like, where do you want to go? What are some of the organizations? And then you
Yes.
start talking to people on the inside, right? Because they're going to be potentially a little bit more transparent. And there's some etiquette behind that too. I know that will be another conversation about what entails in in an informational interview, but you can gather some of that information early on for sure.
Yeah, totally. Information is your friend.
Especially when you're trying to leverage your salary here. Absolutely. Now, you alluded to this a little bit, but can we talk a little more about what are some things that candidates can negotiate other than salary? Let's say that they're like, okay, we can't budge on the salary that you want, but what does that look like?
You can negotiate on titles, more so at smaller organizations. You can negotiate vacation time. Smaller organizations, you can negotiate that. Larger organizations, it's harder to negotiate that. But if you have a vacation coming up, like I just had a client that's getting a role, that's getting offered at Bloomberg, and she has 10 days of vacation coming up. She's going to India with her family in April. She can negotiate that, hey, I don't want that counted against my vacation time. Is that cool? And usually the boss will be like, fine, I won't code that in and I'll give you the free 10 days. That's something that you can negotiate as you're joining. You can sometimes negotiate a path to promotion, that you will be considered for a promotion at X period of time. I can tell you that they're not necessarily going to guarantee that, but that's something that you definitely want to get in email writing, that you will be put up for promotion after X period of time. Again, it's harder to do that at big organizations and smaller organizations, but you can negotiate that. Um, you can negotiate signing bonus. You can negotiate a lot on relocation, and not just the amount of money they give you for relocation, but if they want you to relocate now, and now when we're recording this, it's in March, but say you have kids in school and the school's not out till May or June, and you're like, hey, I don't want to relocate until my kids graduate and before the next school year. Can I relocate in like the summer months instead of relocate immediately? You will often get a lot of flexibility on the date to relocate. And that, once you're in the company, by the way, you can often renegotiate that when you're at the company as well and postpone that multiple times. I've seen people postpone that multiple years and never actually do the relocation, even though they said they were going to. I don't recommend that, but that is something that you can negotiate on the relocation. Um, and again, it depends on the company, depends on their policy, but I've seen that happen. You can negotiate, uh, yeah, titles, ability to hire people, like how many open roles you have. So there's lots of things that you can negotiate. And ideally, that negotiation should start after you get that offer. You can jot down a list as you're having the conversation about the interview about what would you would need to take this offer. And then you decide on which factors you are important to you and which factors are less important to you, because you may not get everything that you're looking for, but you need to understand what are need to haves versus what are nice to haves.
Yeah, that's a great kind of way of looking at it. And again, going back to when we think about how we coach clients and individuals, we talk about values, and your values come into play in the negotiation piece, right? When you want to accept that offer. And so I will personally share when I have been in these conversations, if the salary that I'm asking for can't be met, my values, I care about professional development. Going to conferences are expensive, doing trainings are expensive, and I've been able to negotiate that.
That great point, and you can negotiate coaching too. So a lot of our clients, once they get into the company, they will ask for ability to continue to work with an external coach and to get coaching fees reimbursed. And that's something that the companies will often pay for as well.
Yeah, you can be very creative, but again, this is why the preparation is so important to have ahead of time.
Yeah. And it is important not to die on your sword with some of these things that, like, okay, it might be nice to go to conferences, but if you look at what the total cost of those conferences is throughout the year, maybe it's $5,000. I'd rather actually fight for a better sign-on bonus or a better salary of $10,000, and I'll pay for the conferences out of my own pocket.
That's a good point. That's a great point. Absolutely. Okay, so you kind of mentioned one here. What are some other common salary negotiation mistakes that people often make?
Anchoring. So the term anchoring is where you set your goal based on where you currently are at. Well, that's not always the definition of anchoring, but that's what I'm alluding to here. So when I inbound, like when I onboard a new client, one of the first questions we ask in the onboarding call is how much are you seeking to earn in your next role? And even though you shouldn't say that to a recruiter, I'm asking it for my client because that helps us establish their plan. Almost all the time, what they're seeking is very damn close to what they're currently making. And
Mm,
often, even though I phrase a question, Liz, how much are you looking to earn in your next role? Most people will say, well, I'm currently earning X. Even though I did not ask that, I'm like, what do you want to earn? Not what have you earned? What do you want to earn? And then people are anchoring on what they're currently earning. And then they're setting their next number $10,000 higher or 20% higher over that anchored number. And going back to your point earlier in this conversation, where women are paid 70 or 80 cents on the dollar, Latino are paid lower as well, Black women, people, all people of color, underrepresented, disabled individuals, because they are currently getting paid lower because of lots of systemic biases in the system. They're asking for a lower number. So don't ask for a number. Don't think about like, don't anchor on a number based on what you're currently earning. Your past earnings should have no correlation with your future earning potential. Only if it works to your advantage. So if you're getting paid a shit ton of money, and I've done this, like when I was at Google and I was getting interviewed at Bridgewater, I told them very early on that, hey, I'm making north of 500,000. So unless you're higher than that, it's not worth us continuing the conversation. I did that intentionally at that point because Bridgewater has a very difficult interview process and I didn't want to go through it
mm.
unless they were going to pay me something that was worthwhile. Um, so in that case, I anchored because I thought my anchor was high. I might have actually set myself back because maybe they were going to be willing to spend $1 million for me, and now they're like, "Oh, we can get this guy for $600,000 or $700,000." So anchoring is something that people um, mistakenly revert back to, and again, back to your point, where women and people of color are getting paid lower numbers. If you're anchoring on a lower number, you're going to be asking for a lower compensation in your next role.
I see that a lot. I hear that a lot. It makes sense what you're saying about it's almost a mindset shift, right? And kind
Yeah.
of getting out of that cycle. Kind of you're setting yourself up like, okay, just a few $1,000s more here, a few $1,000s more there, but it's like you want to think bigger and not hold that number that maybe where you started off your career because it kind of creates that trajectory for you in the long run.
It does. And yes, and that's another thing. People should move around more often. And I know
Mm,
people like stability. And if you want stability because you have young children at home or you just don't want to switch around a lot, that's okay. But if you are an individual who cares about your career trajectory and cares about increasing your compensation, a rule that I share with people is the 2 year rule. Every 2 years, you should be moving up in the organization, either getting promoted or getting significant increase in scope over in the organization in terms of regional or functional expertise or something that is stretching you and your skill set. And if you're not getting that internally after 2 years and you care about your compensation and your career, get the hell out every
mm.
2 years.
That's a
And you
great
know, it doesn't have to be exactly 2 years, but use that as a rough rule of thumb. New every two, like the Verizon commercial used to be.
Yes. I absolutely love that, especially for I work at a university and I teach a career course and I always talk about, salary negotiation, like starting them early on. And so this is a great tip and I'm going to share that with them for sure. Because yeah, there's so many things that we learn early on with our families and their careers. And so for many folks, this is new, right? Like, wait, what? 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I've had 29 jobs over my 30 plus year career. So I've done it more than New Every Two, not always by my choice, but I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot. I've built a strong network, and I'm stronger because of it.
No, I definitely see that. Uh, Now, I would love if you can share a memorable story from your experience where someone successfully negotiated a much higher salary than they initially offered.
Yeah. So there's this woman. I'm going to call her Susan. That's not her real name.
Yeah.
She got displaced from American Express. She was making $360,000 at American Express. She was a VP at American Express. She was setting her sights on tech, got interviews at Google. They had asked her some questions about compensation, and working with us, she effectively deflected and deferred those compensation conversations. Eventually, she got the offer after multiple rounds of interviews. They made her an offer of $400,000, a pretty nice title at Google. They were going to relocate her from Florida to California, where the role had to be, which was a negative impact for her because she was moving from a tax-free state to California, which is a high tax state. Because we're able to deflect and defer the conversation, and we did not talk about compensation until the offer, we were able to go back to Google with some numbers, with some data, with actually sharing the different impact of compensation in a tax-free state versus a tax state like California. And with that data and with open-ended questions and with having conversations rather than email, we were able to get her compensation up to $543,000 in year one. So it went up by $143,000. And that was a combination of RSUs, restricted stock units, that vested in that year, sign-on bonus, and salary. She wanted to go from level 7 to level 8. Level 8 at Google is very hard to get, director. They were not going to budge on that, but they budged in other areas. She got $543,000. She's been there for 2 years now, I think, maybe a year and a half, and she's making more money than she's ever made in her career.
That's amazing. That is incredible. Like even again, just those numbers for a lot of people, I think even the clients that I work with, like those are not the ranges that we're
Yeah.
seeing. So if someone is, I've had clients who are like, yeah, they're a little bit more in the higher end. It's like, okay, that's great.
Well,
But
I'll
that,
give you another example on the lower end.
yeah.
We had this woman, I'm not going to use her name. I don't know if she would give me permission to, but she was working for, well, she probably would, but I'm not going to do it. She's working for a ad agency in suburban Ohio. She was working there for 9 years. She was getting underpaid. She was making like $65,000. And she was getting nice raises, but she went from like 50,000 to $65,000 over like 9 years. Um, she came to us. We started looking for other roles for her. She got an offer at another ad agency somewhere else in Ohio for $120,000, higher title.
Mhm.
She had some reservations about it, but I'm like, hey, let's use that offer at your current place and maybe they'll match it. Not only did they match it, they increased it to 125 and they bumped up her title from manager to like director. Again, because like it was a small organization, so they had more flexibility with the title,
Yep.
but they came up with a number pretty quickly, which is very positive that this woman was able to increase her comp from 60 to $125,000 because she had that counter offer. She had asked them over the years that she was underpaid, and they gave her like a 5% raise here, an 8% raise there, but not a 100% raise. So by having that external offer, she actually was not like she was prepared to leave for that other company. She didn't think her company was going to boost her comp that much. She was surprised that they did. It's a positive that they did that, but I would argue that she probably is owed a lot of back money for those 9 years where they were underpaying her. That being said, she's happy. She has a 2-year-old at home, and she's able to stay with her company that she likes. She liked everything about it except the compensation. Now the compensation is rectified, and now she has a much juicier title as well.
I'm glad that you brought that up because that is also a strategy. And for a lot of organizations, is that you need that counteroffer in order for them to increase your
Yeah,
salary.
that is the best leverage you have. Although when you come with that counter offer, you need to be prepared to leave because that company can very well say, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out.
Yes, that's
Uh,
true. That is
totally
so
cool.
true. Yeah, always be
Yeah.
prepared for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you need to be prepared with that. And that's part of the negotiation strategy that we worked with her. We're like, hey, when you tell them, she wasn't even thinking that they would come up there. I didn't think they would come up that high either. I was surprised.
Oh, yeah,
But they liked her so much. There's a reason why she was there for 9 years.
that's right. That's right. I think sometimes it costs more to lose an
Yeah.
employee like
Yeah.
that. Okay, so I mean, we can talk for hours about this stuff. You've been extremely insightful and resourceful. What are some of your go-to resources for people who want to learn more about salary negotiation strategies?
Well, there's a couple of good books out there. Getting TS is a seminal book on this topic. Uh, a book by Chris Voss, who was a former, I think, FBI negotiator, wrote a book called Never Split the Difference.
Mm,
Great book. And there's a book that a professor from Wharton wrote, Stuart Diamond, called Getting More. He was actually a professor that Google would hire to train their sales representatives on how to effectively negotiate. So those books are all great resources. Also, if people go to our website at kademacareers.com, we have a free negotiation cheat sheet where you can learn the exact phrases to use to deflect, defer, and decline to talk about compensation. And also, we do offer negotiation services as well for people that have a verbal offer in hand.
fabulous. All right, so I'm going to conclude with that. What are some of the services that you offer, and then how can people connect with you?
Sure. Thank you, Liz. So you can find Kadima Careers in a few different places. One, you can go to our website, KADIMA careers.com. You can always find me on LinkedIn. That's where I think Liz and I met, or how I found out about Liz through our mutual contact of Jeremy Schiffling. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Alan Stein, AlanStein. And in terms of what we do at Kadima Careers, we help people get more interviews, more offers, and more money. We do group coaching, we do individualized, personalized coaching, we have a digital course, and we also have specific negotiation services alone. Although generally people will do better as their outcome if they work with us in more of a holistic coaching capacity than by just coming to us at the end when they get the offer. But we do offer that option as well. So when people have a verbal or written offer in hand, they can reach out to us. And if we can't get you at least $10,000 more, we don't charge you anything.
That is such an important thing to note and to mention. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, well, this was an incredible conversation for a Friday morning. I love it. A great way to kick off the weekend. Thank you so much, Alan, for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me today and to share important information to, like you say, for people to own their careers.
Yes. Thank you, Liz. Oh, and one other thing,
Yeah.
and I'm going to have you on our podcast at some point. We do have a podcast as well, not as popular as yours.
Oh
We're
my goodness.
working to get there, but we also have the Steer Your Career podcast as well.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Absolutely. So check out the podcast. Thank you
And Liz,
again.
Liz is going to be on a future episode. We just got to nail down the date.
We will, definitely. Yes. Sounds good. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, Liz.